Well, hello, everybody. I'm Dan Turbyville, and this is Powerhouse Fence Show. Thanks for stopping by and saying hello. This week, we're going to talk about managing a project. So, we're going to get into some of the basics, kind of a broad overview of project management. We'll spend a bit of time talking about ordering material. We're going to talk multiple times about communication, scheduling work, things along those lines. So, if that's interesting to you, let's get into it. The show is presented by Memphis Fence Company, Simpalo, and there's something new coming that will be added as a sponsor of the show. I have a name, I have an LLC, I have a domain name, and have kind of started the process of launching a new business. And so we'll talk about that more in the future. But yeah, there's something else coming. So we have some partners. The Thornton Fence Consulting Group was number one. And so, if you've been around at all, you've heard of Tony Thornton and their Thornton Fence Consulting Group. They also have an AI chatbot that they've worked on a lot called Fence GPT. And they have some content on an online educational platform called School. So I think there's a link to that in the description as well. Check it out. Fence News, Fence Industry Publication. It's like the big magazine size one. So if you want to sign up for that and stay up with all the latest industry trends, and they do a lot of interviews and other things like that. They also have Pete and Jake in their magazine, so that's pretty cool. EZG Manufacturing makes all the big orange equipment that you see at trade shows, the fence hogs and things like that. So they're definitely worth checking out. I like their stuff. We use their stuff, and so their name is up there. I am live. The phone number, as always, is scrolling on the bottom of the screen, 901-878-4987. If anyone wants to call in, feel free to do so. So I used to talk a lot about what I was like reading, so to speak. I actually just kind of listen to audiobooks. I don't really sit down and read books that often because I don't know, I'm not very good at it. Well, I can read fine. I'm not very good at sitting down and reading a book is kind of what I mean. But yeah, so I don't really do that, but I do listen to audiobooks and podcasts and things like that a lot. If you've listened before, I love the Founders podcast. That's one of the ones I always listen to. But I learned the other day, I've listened to uh what's the name of the book? Extreme Ownership, right? And I learned that there's a second book that goes along with that. I think it's called Dichotomy of Leadership. So I'm definitely going to have to check that out. But if you're looking for a book, might be a good one. I don't know. I haven't read it yet. Haven't listened yet. So thanks everybody for being here. As always, I appreciate you tuning in, and I appreciate the support and everything that we get. If you know somebody who could benefit from some of the content that's here, share it with them. If you would like to see different content, a different format, some specific guests, some topics, anything like that, let me know. We're always listening to feedback and always looking for more. But I do appreciate all of you being here. So thank you. We're still running our Make a Wish fundraiser. The link is in the description. I guess that will just go indefinitely. So I will leave the link in the description and I will continue to mention it. Last week, I was on the special 1 year anniversary episode of Fence Guy Friday. Uh, I was on there with Craig and Dan Wheeler. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun. I would definitely suggest checking it out if you haven't listened to that yet. So, having said that, let's get into the show. Like I said, we're going to talk about project management. So, let's kind of recap a little bit of what brought us here, right? So, some of the episodes that we've gone over this year, and I'm going to show you, I've been trying to basically complete the journey, right? So, we started off by talking about our bidding process when we're bidding to general contractors. We did that early in the year. And then there was a couple of episodes about financials and kind of like the basics of financials and a lot of information about how to work towards knowing your numbers, understanding what all of that means, and how to actually use them in the real world. So that was earlier this year. I think at least 2 episodes were about that, right? And, we kinda got into how you how you use all that to come up with your margins and things like that when you're bidding. Did an episode that was kind of or 2 that was kinda like the introduction and the basics of going through a plan set and looking for fence, and then we talked about bidding the job. We've talked about navigating contract documents, submittals, doing all that stuff. And then we've talked about the cash flow process when you sell a job to a general contractor and what it's like to build them and how long to expect to get paid and talked about retainage and all of this other stuff. So all of that has kind of been the series, right, that we've been going through this year. And so now we're going to talk about managing a project after we've sold it. So this will be after the contract documents, the submittals, all of that stuff has happened. We're going to kind of pick up there. So this will be geared towards a job that you sold to a general contractor. A lot of times, might be a little bit more complex, have some different nuances than it would in like a business to business kind of setting, but not always. A lot of the like business to business stuff is super complicated. I bet you we've been working for like 4 months on going through the whole onboarding process and everything with one customer, and this customer is in that business to business world. They're kind of like a property management company, I think, but they're a massive company. And it's been pretty complicated and a long, drawn out process to even get set up to where we can do work with them. But I think, finally got to the end. So, like I said, I like to say nothing is always right. And so that applies there. There's a million possible scenarios. So when you sell a job, you're trying to manage a job. I mean, there's so many scenarios that you can run into depending on the job you're doing, who you're working for, where it is, all of that stuff, right? Like there's endless possibilities. So I can't possibly cover all of them, but I want to just kind of go through like some basic stuff, okay? One key takeaway from all of this is to just watch the little details. Right. So if you're ordering material for a job, it's easy to remember to get the post and the wire, right? But don't forget the hog rings and don't forget the tie wire. I mean, you have 2, 3, 5, 10 little things that you forgot or left off when you were ordering material or whatever. You wind up having to do overnight shipments. You got crews that can't make progress, things like that. And I mean, your profit margin is gone. It doesn't take I mean, obviously, it can be one big thing, right? But also those little things just kind of stack up. I mean, might not seem like a lot when you got to spend 50 or $75 to get something overnighted to you, but do that multiple times and then stop progress and everything else, and it all just stacks up, right? So, also, when you got to make another trip out to go install something, I mean, man, how many times have you gotten to the very end of the job? Right? Everything is done except I'm missing this one little piece that we forgot to order, or we lost, or it got tore up, or whatever the case may be, right? So we get there, we're missing that one thing. Now we have to wait a few days or a few weeks or whatever it is for that part to come in. And then we have to go back out and we have to install that part again. So all of those are the little things to watch out, or some little things that you can watch out for. Just this week, we went out to start installing a job. It's like a $40,000 job. And we had a bolt, like a, you know, $2 bolt that completely held up progress on this whole $40,000 job. It's a V-track gate. And when we bought the V-track wheels, they were a type that comes with plates that go on either side of the gate. I don't like those as much. So I got the boxes and we put the boxes in, did everything. And I don't know if nobody realized or it was just forgotten or whatever, but somehow during the process, we didn't order bolts that were long enough to actually go all the way through the box, right? And so when they went out to start installing, it was like, oh, yeah, by the way, we need these bolts. And we didn't have any. We dug around, we looked for them. And so then, they went ahead and they went to the job site. And then we had the guy from the yard, a guy from our yard, he went out and probably spent a couple hours. He had to go hunt the bolts down and get them out to him and all of that stuff. And then we have a crew out there that's kind of just hanging out, waiting for the bolts. And like they were able to make progress, but really the bolt was the thing that they needed to start. So all of that time, right? The yard guy, the crew, everything else that happened, the bolt, all of that just came straight out of the bottom line on that job. And it was all because we didn't have one, two bolts. So those little things, the little things can get you. Especially it seems like when we get into some of the more unique stuff, right? Most of the chain link stuff, like I said, tie wire and hog rings and things like that. I mean, if it's a local job and we forgot tie wire, we probably have them. But if it's a V-track gate with some boxes instead of the plates, and we don't have those bolts laying around, right? So there's it just depends on the job and depends on what we're doing. But a lot of times the little things sneak up on you. So here's some kind of basic stuff. So yeah, that was the key takeaway, right? Is watch out for those little things. So here's some other basic stuff that I wanted to get out of the way on the front end before I really dove into anything. Project management, I was thinking about it. And does it all just boil down to a lot of communication? You have to communicate with the customer, with the vendors, with the installers. You're just like the main hub for communication between everyone to coordinate the different moving parts and stuff. So you definitely have to communicate enough and you have to communicate well. So there's one. Sometimes whenever I'm in doing these jobs and I'm faced with a choice, right? I like to think about maybe two or three different solutions that kind of just come to mind. And after I think about these different solutions, I'll think about the different possible outcomes. And in fact, when I find myself in those scenarios, I like to think, what is the worst possible outcome? And if something does go completely sideways when we try to go down whatever path it is, am I okay with that outcome, right? Can I live with that? And so that leads me to one of two things. Either A, I want to make sure I do everything in my power to stay away from that outcome, or I maybe start off down a different path. But that's kind of where my mind goes. And it goes that way a lot. Like I mentioned earlier, starting another business, right? So worst possible outcome is there's zero customers that ever happen for that business. Am I good with losing all of the initial investment, right? The time, the money, everything else that goes into starting it? Am I okay with just walking away knowing that I lost that because I tried something? And in this scenario, yes, I am. And so I am going down that path. But you can see kind of how my mind works a little bit in those scenarios, right? So if you're faced with a choice, making decisions, trying to figure something out, and you're unsure, you can always ask somebody else's opinion, right? You can call somebody in the fence world, you can call somebody in the whatever different contracting world, any of that stuff, right? It's okay for us to ask. And a lot of times we don't want to do that. I get it. I'm the same. I don't want to ask people, right? I want to be a big tough guy and I want to figure it out myself, but it's okay to ask. Um, excuse me. So if you're going to go ask questions on a Facebook group, a fence Facebook group, let's say, include enough information for people to be able to help you. It's really hard when you see these questions and it's like, yeah, that is the question, but there's more information that people need to really understand the situation that you're in and the options that you have. And there's information that is missing a lot of times for people to be able to answer the question and answer it well. So, like I said, if you're going to go out and post questions in, you know, Facebook groups or other social media places or whatever, just put enough information in there so that people kind of get a feel for what's going on. Communicate with your customer. I already talked about this a little bit, but when people ask a question, hey, when are you going to be here? Don't ignore it, right? It's better to not know the answer and to tell them you don't know the answer than it is to just ignore them. People get so mad when you don't respond. And I've been in the situation before where I've asked questions and I get no response. I know for sure it makes me mad. I've been the person that people have asked questions to, and I didn't respond because I didn't know how to respond. And I am absolutely sure that I made them mad. So, like I said, it's really better if you just say, hey, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out an answer. I'm working on it, something along those lines. And And it's hard, again, to not know the answer, right? Same as we don't a lot of times want to ask people questions. We also want to have the answer when someone asks us a question. And it's okay to not have that answer all the time. And you don't have to, right? None of us know everything. We don't always have the answers. So, and that's okay. All right. So, like I said, we've already done, we have an executed contract. We have the submittals approved. We have the certificate of insurance issued. We have all of that stuff done, right? So the next thing, again, nothing is always right in my hypothetical scenario. The next thing is we're going to order some material. So when do I order material? Well, I prefer to order it as soon as possible. And that's a super vague answer, right? Actually, it's always as soon as possible, I guess. Sometimes as soon as possible might be as soon as I realize that we're going to install that job next week and I haven't ordered it. But what I like to do is order it after we get submittals approved. I don't ever want to order before those submittals are approved, before we have contracts, before the certificate of insurance is complete, issued, accepted, all of that. Because again, think of that worst case scenario outcome, right? We ordered material. We can't get to we can't come to an agreement on a certificate of insurance. We're liable to not do the job and they find somebody else to do it. And if that happens, I don't want to be stuck with that material. So that's why getting all of this stuff done before you get to the point where you're ordering material is important, because that worst case scenario can happen. And if it does, you don't want to be stuck with a bunch of stuff that you might not ever use. We have a buku of stuff. A lot of it is leftover extra stuff that was ordered for jobs. We have had jobs canceled and things like that. And I mean, we got a bunch of stuff, and it's a little bit overwhelming to just look around sometimes, to be honest, because you don't really know what to do with it. You hate to sell a $500 fence panel for 20 bucks on Facebook Marketplace or whatever, but at the same time, it's just in the way. So anyway, yeah, get all your stuff done before you think about ordering material. So now I want to order material as soon as possible, right? So I really want to order material after that, all those steps are done, because I would like to pay the same amount of money as we bid the job, as when we bid the job. Um, yeah, sometimes the price goes down, right? It does happen. But also on the flip side of that, when COVID happened, the price of steel went up 350%. Uh, fair well within the window of possibility from the time when you have approved submittals until you go out on a job site. So I don't want to get caught in the middle of something crazy right that like that. So again, I want to try to order material as soon as I can, just to avoid that. Like, yeah, maybe I'm missing out on the times when the price goes down. That's okay. But I don't want to be caught in the situation where the price went up. So, and another thing along those lines, like, I personally understand I'm not able to monitor world events and markets and all of this stuff and predict what the cost of steel is going to do over the next 3 to 6 months. Some people might be really great at doing that. And some people might be able to, predict future markets and say, no, I'm going to wait 3 months because this is going to happen. I'm not that guy. And so I know I want to try to buy it at what I bid it at. So, also another thing that buying it as soon as possible does a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, it prevents you from having to wait on material when the customer's ready for you. I mean, sometimes they're ready as soon as you sign the contract and they're already jumping up and down. But sometimes you might have to wait 6 months or 2 years or whatever. So we're wrapping up a job right now. And I was looking at some stuff on it the other day and I saw the proposal, bid the job in April of 2022. And we are like at the end of the installation part of the job now. So that just goes to show, like, sometimes these projects can be really long. And if I had ordered the material now that I bid in April of 2022, well, there's probably a pretty drastic cost difference, right? So I like to ask for a lead time when I order the material. And ideally, make a reminder, maybe like schedule an event on my calendar and Outlook or something along those lines, right? But somehow remind myself to check on the material when that lead time comes. So if they tell me it's going to be 3 weeks, then I'm going to check on it in 3 weeks and maybe 4 weeks. And then after that, I'm going to say, hey, what's going on? And this is especially important if you have committed to be on a job site at some point, right? So I mean, you can tell Siri to remind you. You can put it in Outlook. You can put it in any kind of calendar, right? And it'll pop up a reminder and say, hey, don't forget, check on this material. I use that kind of stuff all the time because I 100% will forget things. I am not that good at remembering a multitude of things that I need to do over the course of the next 2, 3, 4 weeks or months or days or whatever. So I have to rely on various technologies to help me with that, or sometimes sticky notes. If you looked at my computer in my office right now, you would see a row of sticky notes across it, right? Because that's another thing that I'll do. I leave a bajillion things open on my computer throughout the course of the week because they're all things that I need to get done and I can't do them right now. So by having all those things open, it's just kind of that reminder, right? So I need a lot of reminders. Another question, a question to ask yourself before you just go and order the material on a job that you're going to do in 2 years is what are you going to do with the material? Do you have a place you can store it safely? Right. So it's not going to be stolen. It's not going to get ran over. It's not going to get messed up by sitting in the weather, all of that stuff. Uh, so if you do not have that place, then that's a whole nother scenario, right? Because I hope that you planned something during the bidding process, whether that's renting some space to store it or plan for some anticipated cost escalations or something like that over the course of whatever that time period is. But you definitely need to make sure you have a place to keep it, right? So since we're here in Memphis, Tennessee, we typically can't put material on job sites because it will disappear. We do sometimes have people go steal material like during installations. It doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened a few times. We've had people call us out to come look at fence where people just came out and stole their fence that was already installed. And, if it's an ornamental fence, they might go out and cut the panels between the posts and steal all the panels. So that it happens. Some people, you might be in a place where you can store material on site, and that's good. If the contractor is cool with it, they have an area that you can use to as like the lay down yard for your material and stuff like that. Uh, Sometimes what happens to us is we'll buy material for a job, and sometimes people go over and they kind of pick through it a little bit to fill in stuff that they need for another job, right? And that happens to us. And so what we did is we made like some little stands and we just went and bought some, I don't know, 1,000-foot roll of some sort of rope. And we've just kind of started putting rope around the like job lot for specific jobs. And so now at least it is designated, right? Like, hey, everything inside of this rope is for whatever job. That seems to have worked for us so far. If something changes with that, I'll let you know. But I think it was just something we started doing last year. But we just kind of, like I said, rope it off, and that way there's like a hey, this is for some specific job. Don't go take it. But if you do take it, because if you need it, just tell somebody, right? That's one of the frustrations in the world is that you might not ever find out that it was taken for another job until you are on the job site and then nobody did it kind of deal. And nobody does a lot of stuff around here. Nobody messes up things. But anyway, yeah. So we've been roping it off, right? But the thing that we struggle with more than the big stuff, right? So I mean, really, when we rope it off, there's like the pipe and the wire and the things like that are in there. But we kind of struggle a little bit more keeping the small things and even more specific, like the specialty small things, right? So a closer, I found just yesterday or the day before, I found three Lock and Knox Verticlose closers over here on a shelf, and they were just inside a cardboard box, right? All three of them were shoved in the cardboard box. I opened the end of it and I saw them in there. I was like, oh, there's, $1,500 worth of stuff that we probably ordered again because we couldn't figure out where it was. That is that's a bit of a problem that we face, right? It's kind of the whole organizational stuff. And it happens more when the job is 6 months out or 12 months out or something, and you buy the stuff that early. So I just want to point all this out because if you're going to buy it super early and you got a bunch of little stuff that needs to be kept inside or something like that, just think about the having a system in place, right? And some sort of organization to where you know where the things go and you can mark it for this is for this job. But and we have like maybe the keys for a panic bar, get lost during the installation, but and like screws and bolts that things that come in small packages, right? Or are kind of the thing that there's about four different places we might put it, and hopefully it's in one of those four places. And if nobody can find it, we wind up buying it again. And that sucks because that just comes straight off the bottom line uh, on that job. And, most of the stuff, like when we find it, we can say, oh, hey, that's here. And hopefully we use it at some point. So, anyway, just kind of throwing out some of the stuff that we struggle with just to kind of, I don't know, think through a little, right? So we talked about this before, but just remember when you order material, you probably have to pay for the material before you can bill for stored materials. So just be aware of that, right? We talked about that, I don't know, a week or two ago, right? The episode about cash flow. So that's a thing. Um, and sometimes along the same lines of like losing stuff, right? So sometimes what we do is we'll bill for the big stuff, the pipe and the wire and all that kind of stuff. We remember to bill for that stored materials, but we might forget to bill for some gate hardware or the bolts or the rivets that we had to order or whatever that is, right? Like I said, the smaller things. And the example I gave earlier with the three lock and Knox closers sitting in a box, right? Again, that's $1,500 sitting in a fairly small box that we did not bill for that material. And then, we could have, and we didn't. Now we do eventually bill when the job is complete. Like, we bill them for it, but it's just kind of hard to, it's a lot to keep up with when you get into those scenarios and maybe you're having parts custom made for a job. You've got two or three or six or eight different vendors that you're buying stuff from, and things kind of get spread out a little bit, right? Unless you have a really good system of tracking all of that stuff. And to me, the only way I know how to do that is by leveraging technologies. We use Monday.com a lot. I know I've talked about it before if you've been around a while, but we use it a lot and kind of use that as an array of different things. But one of the things we do with it is some project management stuff. And so we try our best to keep all of that kind of in one place. But like I said, a lot of times it's those little things, right? Speaking of the little things, I'm just kind of hung up on these little things because, again, those little things are the details that will add up and add up and add up. And yeah, it's, we all remember stories of, oh man, I ordered the wrong post, right? Or, oh man, we built those gates and they didn't work right and we had to fix them or we had to build them again or whatever. Like we remembered those because they're big. But what about the 50 little things that happened between those big things or the 300 little things that happened? Like those 300 little things probably added up to be more than the one big thing, right? But we don't ever really notice it like that. So, like I said, yeah, I'm kind of stuck on the little things, but here we are. So, when you're ordering material, it's also important to think through that whole install process. So you think about all the little things that you need to do the job, right? So of course you got your like hinges and latches and post caps and the gate hardware and all that stuff, but what if you need a certain size drill bit to install the gate hardware and you don't have the drill bits? You get out there to install the gate hardware and you pull out your drill bit box and you go, "Oh crap, I don't have the size that I need." Right? Or you're installing something that has some sort of specialty bolt, right? Some security screws, something like that. You need sockets for them. Touch up paint. A lot of times certain vendors or certain manufacturers include touch up paint and then there's some that don't. And so again, if you're on a job, I mean, if you're on a job that's 12 hours away and you need some of this stuff, it's a little more complicated. If you got a job next door, no big deal. Well, it's still a thing, but it's not as big of a deal, right? So you don't want to wind up on a job and then need some kind of special thing and you have to wait 2, 3 days to get it. You have to wait a week. You got to wait 6 weeks, like whatever that is. You don't want to wind up there because it sucks. A lot of times you can kind of skip that part. If it's a big job, you might be able to skip that gate, go do something else. And then when the part comes in, go back to that gate and finish it. But there's also the times where you can't finish the job because you're missing that part. And, we're normally like one of the last people on a job site. And if we need an extra 2 or 3 weeks to order some part that we should have had and we forgot, there's going to be some people mad at us. And we're normally under well, a lot of times we're under a decent bit of pressure to get a job done anyway because you know, somebody before us took longer than they were supposed to, or everybody before us, maybe. And it gets to us, and they're trying to hit a schedule, and we've got 6 weeks worth of work to do, and we've got 3 weeks to fit it in, right? So you're already under pressure. You don't want to be under that pressure and then also be realizing that you forgot some stuff because then you got to start overnighting things and doing crazy stuff and maybe buying it from a retailer that normally you'd go straight to a distributor or manufacturer and you're paying markups. And it just, again, those little things that add up over and over and over. So, what do I order? Do I order exactly what I need for the job? Or do I order maybe like 5 or 10% extra, a few extra panels, a few extra posts? Well, so I try to bid it the way that I'm gonna order it. That's my goal, is to bid it the way that I'm gonna order it. And so if I'm gonna buy 2 or 3 extra panels to do a job, I don't calculate the exact number of panels I need. I wanna put in those 2 or 3 extra whenever I bid it, and then when I actually get to the point where it's time to order it, I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna make sure that I order the 2 or 3 extra, right? So that's kind of how I operate whenever it comes to like what I'm going to buy. And I don't really operate on like a percentage of extra things that I need to get. It's just very situational and it depends on the job. So I'll look at whatever job we're doing and I'll kind of say, man, if it's 30 panels, then, I may get one extra. But if it's 300 panels, then I might get a few extra, right? So I just kind of look at it and order a little bit extra. I bid a little bit extra and then I order a little bit extra. So one thing whenever I'm ordering this little bit extra, kind of along those same lines, is I don't want to order too much. And I don't want to order stuff that I already have. Again, the verticlos closers that are sitting in this box over here. So the next time I have a job where I need those, hopefully one of us remembered that they're sitting down here on this shelf and we don't order them. Right. So we always try to like take the material list and we try to check and say, okay, this thing needs 412 2-inch eights, and we've got 68 of them that were left over from something or, in stock or whatever that is. And so we try to like go through the line items and make sure that we don't over order or order things that we already have here. And we just did that. And I mean, probably eliminated half of the line items that were on a material order because we already had it in stock and we didn't have to order it. That's a thing that you got to learn when you're new is you bid a job, you sold a job, you're all excited, hooray, let's go. And you just friggin' write a PO for that full order, right? And then it shows up and you realize you ordered 2-inch dome caps and you've got 3,000 of them or whatever. So again, just kind of go through the list, right? And see what do I have in stock? What do I have left over from the last job? What do I not need to order? And you can build your material list, right? And build your order based on that. So speaking of Fin Sky Friday, Fin Sky podcast. There's Craig stopping by. Thanks for being here. Good to see you. So yeah, like I said, I try to order a little bit extra, but I also try to make sure that I'm not ordering things that we already had. So who do I order from? Well, I like to order from the person that I bid with. It doesn't always work out like that, but that's my goal, right? So whenever I'm bidding a job, I might go out, I might get 2 or 3 different prices, and after I've done that, I'm going to choose one of them and I'm going to go with that one. And that's normally whoever has the best price, right? Or whoever is correct, which is a struggle. So I try to go back to that person when I sell it. It doesn't always work, but that's my objective is that like hey, we partnered in this thing. We were able to put together a good bid and we sold the job. So now let's both reap the rewards of the hard work. Now, if I got prices from three different people, and the one that I went in with has had a 20% increase on the material cost, and the other two have not. Well, I'm at least going to call them and have a conversation with them and be like, "Hey, I used your number before, but what's going on?" So, like I said, it doesn't always work, but that is what I try to do. Man, and Dan Wheeler's here. Look at this. Thanks for stopping by, sir. So, again, also was on the episode from last Friday that I talked about earlier. So go check it out. I think it's really ideal if you can take pictures of the material when you receive it. So when it comes in, and we don't always do this, okay? If you haven't figured it out by now, I'm pretty straight up and I'm honest. We don't always do it. But what we will make a very valiant effort to do is take pictures of anything that's like a, kind of more expensive specialty type of thing. If we order a truckload of pipe, we're not going to go out there and take pictures of the truckload of pipe or a truckload of chain link fabric or whatever, unless there's something that stands out. Like when you start unloading the truck, if you see something wrong with it, okay, yeah, they're going to pull their phone out, they're going to take pictures and they're going to say, hey, there's a problem. But we don't really take pictures that well to kind of document it. But what we do in those scenarios is we take that packing slip and we go through line by line and we verify that all the stuff they say is here is actually here. And we'll have people, I mean, the driver might be here for an extra half an hour. And if so, sorry, what are you going to do? But we got to make sure that it's all here because there's been a number of times that we have missing things. And if you realize that 3 months down the road, it's really hard to build a case. If you realize that when it's coming off the truck, it's a lot easier to say, hey, man, we ordered this thing and it's not here. Here's the packing slip. The driver is standing right here with me. We can't find it. So verify the quantity because you don't want to fight that fight way down the road, right? Supporting our friends just happens to have an awesome show. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I think I'm going to have a sip of tea. So here we go. Takes a lot of talking to do this, and my throat just gets dry. But again, if we order something special, a lot of times prefabricated fence, even like we'll go out and take pictures of it to document the packaging and things like that. Because a lot of times you get into the bundle and you might find a few panels that have bent pickets or they're beat up or something like that, where a forklift stuck in the side of them. And I like to have the picture when it was sitting on the truck, so I know, was it like that when it showed up here, or did we do it? So those are things. Like I said, really any of that kind of like specialty stuff that's maybe a little more delicate or whatever you want to say. So I walked to the yard yesterday because I was ordering material for a job and we're doing the thing I'm talking about, right? We go through and we check, what do we already have? What do we need to order? And I'm walking around and I had to order some domestic 8 5/8 Schedule 40 pipe. And so we have a spot that's kind of designated for these items, right? For this domestic 8 5/8 Schedule 40. And we had some left over. There was a few pieces down there. So I went over to look at it. I just wanted to double check, make sure it didn't have India stamped in it or anything, because turns out they will not let you change India to Indiana and then go install it. But I'm checking it out and I noticed there's grinder marks on it. And I thought, huh. So does that mean that we ordered some domestic pipe and maybe someone upstream from us screwed up and didn't place the order or sent us the wrong stuff or, had the wrong stuff sent to them or whatever? And they just took a grinder to it and removed the stamp out of it and then sprayed some galvanized paint or put galvanized paint back over it. That's exactly what it looked like happened. And I can tell you, it did not happen here. And at this point, I don't know who it came from because it wasn't something we received yesterday. So it's something that's been sitting out here a while. I don't know who it came from because it doesn't have anybody's name on it, right? Everything is removed. So you wind up with stuff like that. So when you're unloading, you got to check it, because now there's nothing I can do. I mean, I can use it on another job, right? I just can't use it on the one where I need the domestic pipe. So check it out when it comes off the truck. Take pictures and just take a minute to document what you're unloading. So that took a long time. That was a lot of talk about material, wasn't it? And we haven't even really like started managing the job yet. All we did was order some material. So we got the material sorted out. So once, and remember, I said when I order material, I like to ask for a lead time and then follow up on the lead time and all that stuff, right? So that way, if I am asked, hey, how's it going? When can you be here? I have some sort of an idea. But in the meantime, after when we get close to the material being here, maybe I've got a shipment verification, maybe it's shown up on the yard, something like that. So now's the time when I like to communicate with the project manager, superintendent, someone like that, and say, hey, when do you think you'll be ready for us? Right. And when you document or when you communicate like this, it's, I believe, very important for you to document it. So, when did you make this phone call? If it is a phone call, what did you ask them? What was the answer? All right. And again, technology can help you with that. Or maybe you have a good system of notebooks or, whatever that is, but somehow document it in a way that you can find it in 6 months or 8 months or a year or whatever. So if they don't answer the phone, leave a message. This is just kind of a pet peeve for me, right? Is that people call me in a professional setting and don't leave a message. And it's like, if you're calling your grandma and you don't leave a message, that's okay because your grandma probably will see missed call from Bobby. But if I don't know who you are and you call me, I'm not going to go through and call back every spam number that I have a missed call from just with the hopes that one of them might be legitimate. So, again, in the professional world, if you call somebody that maybe doesn't know your number or have you saved or whatever, just leave a message, right? And document that. So when you document, hey, I called them on what's today, July 17th at 4 p.m. and they didn't answer. Okay, that's cool, right? You have some sort of documentation that you tried because every once in a while, you better be prepared to make a detailed schedule of events and hand over in the event of a big dispute. All right. I've been in meetings before where I have 4, 5, and 6 layers up of bosses above the project manager, and it's the VP of operations for North America on the phone or whatever. And they want to know the answer to these questions. And if you don't have it documented, then you'll wind up looking like a dodo. And it's not because like, hey, you did the wrong thing, right? It's because that's just who they are. And you're gonna wind up in a spot you don't want to be in. So again, document it. I've been in situations where we are getting yelled at because the job's not done. Oh, we're gonna charge you liquidated damages. We're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. Having all this stuff documented really comes in handy when you inevitably find yourself in that scenario. Um, Kind of back to the submittal thing. I like to give them a schedule with the submittals, right? Procurement, this long. Fabrication, if there is any, this long. Coding, if that's the thing, this long. Installation, this long, right? And just kind of spell all of that out. And that, remember, the submittals really typically happen at the very beginning of the job. And so by doing that, you're allowing them to adjust their schedule based on how much time you need. You don't want to get to the end of the job and they think it's going to take you 2 weeks and you planned on being there 10. I promise you, you do not want to be in that situation because it's never fun. And again, that's one of the things that happens without effective communication early on. That's what it leads to. So try to take the notes. It does take a little bit of time to, well, one, it takes a little bit of time to write it down, right? But also it takes a little bit of time to keep all that stuff organized in some kind of way that you can go back to it. But when you find yourself in that situation every year or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, you're gonna be glad that you did it, and it's gonna pay off at some point, probably. Alright, so first time, when you call them, "Hey, materials on the yard. When do you think you're gonna be ready for us?" And if they tell you, "Oh, we're still probably about 3 months away." All right, cool. We'll follow up, right? And then again, set a reminder for 2 or 3 weeks before that point to call them and say, "Hey, how are you looking?" And document it all, right? Most of the time, if they say 3 months and you call them 2 or 3 weeks, they're gonna say, "Oh, we're still a month out," or "We're still 6 weeks out," or 2 months or whatever, right? The start date a lot of times is a little bit elusive. It's a thing that, like, it's gonna be here, and then you get there and it's moved, and then it's moved, and it can be a little bit elusive, but I don't like getting the phone call of, "Hey, we're ready for you to come out tomorrow." And I don't understand. I've been in the fence business and just about my entire life in this specific fence business. I did work for another fence company when I went to college for, like, I don't know, a semester or 2 or something like that. But aside from that, this is the only place I've ever worked, and this is all I've ever done. Um, and I don't know how other trades operate. I don't know if electricians just have crews of people sitting around waiting for a phone call of, "Hey, we're ready for you," but we don't, right? And we inevitably get those phone calls of, "All right, can you be out here tomorrow?" Well, no, we have a job or jobs or whatever that we're trying to do, and it's going to take us the rest of the week. We've got customers that have been on our schedule for 3 weeks, and we've got to get them done. So that's just kind of the inevitability that not staying on top of the start date leads to. And it also is frustrating on the flip side of that, right? To where the start date is moved 2 or 3 or 4 times. And sometimes I'm just going to tell you the start date might move 6 months, right? And it might do it a week at a time, it might do it a month at a time, or it might do it 6 months at a time. But sometimes it will move like that. So you got to be prepared. Well, there's not really anything you can do to be prepared for it, right? Other than mentally understand that it's going to happen and not get mad about it. But it happens. That's why documenting all of that stuff is important, right? If your start date moves 6 months and now you've got negative 3 months to complete the job, they're going to be mad at you before you ever even show up. So, again, documenting stuff is important. So, when you get close to kind of the point where you can start work out there, you're going to start attending some of the weekly meetings, and these might be on site. A lot of them are virtual now, but normally 2 to 3 weeks or a month or whatever leading up to you starting, they'll want you to start attending those meetings. Uh, I won't say that nothing is always right. So I won't say they never, but they rarely are going to make you come to all the meetings. And if they do send you a meeting invite, which is also a thing that I've learned that you have to teach newer people, if they send out a mass email at the beginning of a project and they invite every subcontractor to a weekly meeting, and it's a 3 year long project, doesn't mean that you have to go to every one for 3 years most of the time. Right? You're gonna have a lot of times they'll have a kickoff meeting or maybe a couple of them to try to get the project started and kind of like start building schedules and things like that, or refining schedules, I guess I should say. Those you'll go to, and basically you got to go to any meeting that they ask you to go to. It's just how it is, right? If they ask you to be there Thursday, you might be able to say, I can't. But if they've got 12 other people already going to be there, then you just got to make it happen, or send someone else who's capable of representing you the way you want to be represented to the meeting in your place. So when they keep kicking it forward, right, and you keep setting these reminders, just stay on top of that cycle. And again, you don't want them to call and say, "Hey, be here tomorrow." But if they do, then just take a breath, because I promise we've all been in the situation of, man, I've been calling them for 3 months. I've been working on getting on this site for 3 years, whatever that is. And they call you and say, "Hey, we need you out here Monday." And our initial reaction is to get mad at it. But It happens. It's a way. It's just a part of it. So have an honest conversation with them, okay, and say, "Well, I can't be there Monday, but I can be there Thursday." And more times than not, that's okay. And you can give them some. If they call and ask you, you can say, "Man, let me check. Let me see what I can do, and call you back." And but you better call them back if you do. And in those scenarios, like, you can call them back and be like, "Ah, man, I tried, and there's nothing we can do. We've got this and this crew going on, this job going on, whatever that is." And you can throw out a little bit of evidence that you tried to do something to accommodate if you want to. I wouldn't suggest giving them an hour-long explanation of every step you made along the way, but if you throw out a few things, it just kinda like I like to say, "Hey, I did some work," right? I didn't just get off the phone with you, go have lunch, and then call you back. Like, I did some stuff, tried to make it happen for you. So, we've kinda been through that scheduling stuff, right? We finally get to the point where they say, "Oh, yeah, we're ready for you." I would say you better send somebody to the site before you send a crew. Okay, go verify that the site is actually ready, especially if it's a new construction site. You don't want to send a crew out there 3 hours away, book hotel rooms for the week and all of that stuff to get out there and say, "Oh man, look at this. Our fence is supposed to go here and there's a mountain of dirt in the way," right? Or this grass is 12 feet tall and we can't even see where the ground is. Like, or find out somebody's installing a pipe through the middle of the fence line, or whatever situation you run into. It happens a lot. And so, our typical process, our desired process, is that someone in a pickup truck goes to the job site and looks at it to verify that it is indeed ready. And a lot of times you're going to get there and it's not. So, what I would suggest then is take some pictures. Maybe take a video and say, "Hey, here's what's going on. This is what's not ready. This is what's not ready. This is what we need done." And I mean, you don't have to be a jerk about it, right? You don't have to be rude about it, none of that kind of stuff. But, like, also get your point across, right? So there's like, don't be too passive about it and be like, "Oh yeah, okay, we can get somebody out there." But really in the back of your mind, you can't do any work because you didn't bid the job to go out there and not do any work, right? You bid the job to pay folks to go out there and do the work. So you got to get to the point where you can go out and do the work. And again, I like to send a person, a pickup truck, go out, take pictures, take videos, do whatever you got to do to get the point across. And then we'll turn that in and we'll say, "Hey, we went and looked at it. We were planning on starting Monday. It's not ready. Here's what we need done. Let me know what you need from us. Let me know when you get it done. Let me know if we can be of any help." Sometimes they're going to ask you to do some crazy stuff. We did a job a couple years ago. Turns out there was these gigantic boulders. I wouldn't call it riprap. It was kind of that principle, right? But they were giant rocks, and the fence line went through them things all the way. And we went out there and said, "Huh, what are we gonna do about that?" And I said, "Hey man, all we can't set posts through the middle of these giant rocks that you've put on the fence line." And the guy says, "Oh well, can you just take your skid steer and move them?" And we then said, "Yes, but it's going to cost you X amount of dollars for us to put an operator and a machine out here, and we think it's going to take this long to do it." And so we had all these conversations, right? And we finally got through it. It was a pain in the butt. It sucked, but we got it done. And so sometimes things like that happen, right? Sometimes they're like, "Hey, I don't have the manpower to do this thing. Can you help me out?" So then when you see the site's ready, because inevitably the site will be ready sometime, sometimes, or at some time, either one of those, it'll be ready somewhere. So, I think it's kind of helpful to put some white paint on the ground, maybe stick some flags in the ground, walk the fence line with the superintendent, and make sure that you're 100% clear about where the fence goes. And I'll personally like when we have stakes to follow, and I just say, "Hey, can you put a stake at the corner post, end post, gate post, and maybe one every, 300 feet or something like that in long lines. That's my ideal scenario because then I can put the fence where the stakes are and I know I put it where they wanted it. But we're not that great at surveying. I hope some of you are, but we're not that great at surveying. And we're not very good at figuring out where property lines are and all of that stuff. And sometimes we've been in scenarios where we cross property lines, and that is not fun either. I don't like being there. But I really like for someone to tell me, put the fence here. So you can ask for that. On my proposals, one of the exclusions on there is like layout is excluded, maybe surveying is excluded. I specifically lay those out. Now, be careful during your bidding process or the contract review process or whatever, because sometimes it will specifically say that layout, surveying, all of that stuff is in your scope. And if it is, just plan for it. That's all you got to do, right? Just plan for it. But anyway, all right. So we've talked about this whole thing of how the start line moves, right? Which what that does is you inevitably wind up with scheduling conflicts. And some people might disagree. In my opinion, there's no amount of planning that you could possibly ever do to make it so you do not have scheduling conflicts. Okay, because you're going to go out there and well, you're not going to go out there. You're going to get a phone call and say, "Hey, we're finally ready." Okay, cool. That's great because the job that I sold last week is also ready. Remember 3 weeks ago, this customer said we won't be ready for you for another month or 2, and then you sold another job last week and like, now those are stacked on top of each other. The guy called from the job that you sold 8 months ago and said, "Hey, we're ready for you." And then somebody else called from a job that you sold 3 years ago that you forgot even existed and they said they're ready for you. Right? And they're all ready at the same time. It's some phenomenon that seems to happen to where there's every at least one time a year this happens to us where there will be some scenario like that where these multiple jobs just stack up on top of each other and you go, "Holy crap, what am I going to do?" And it's a bit stressful for a little bit of time and you finally work through it and you do the best you can. Again, I like to be honest, I like to be transparent with people, and I mean, I'll just kind of tell them what's going on. Doesn't mean that they're going to be excited to hear it, right? But I mean, I still do it. So they're asking you, when are you going to be here? And again, one of the key takeaways from this 58 minutes and 20 seconds that I've been talking is don't hide from them. Don't run. Don't hide. Don't just ignore the phone call over and over and over for 2 weeks because you don't know, right? Because that's only going to make things worse. It's not gonna fix anything. I promise you, that is that is some years of experience of being in those situations, right? Um, so let's see, the first time I sold a commercial job, I was 19, and probably within a year or 2 of that, I sold a like pretty decent sized job that had multiple different types of custom fabricated fence on it. Some of it was 6 foot tall, some of it was 8 foot tall, some of it was 15 foot tall. A lot of moving parts going on. And I was kind of just thrown to the wolves in this whole thing, right? And so that was that scenario. And I will never forget as long as I live the superintendent from that job calling me and chewing me up one side and down the other. I mean, this guy straight up chewed me out. And, he's a bit of an intimidating fella, actually. He fought MMA, like, amateur fights for a while, and he's a little bit intimidating, and he's a little bit intense, and I'll never forget it. I had no idea what to do. I just, like, went into complete panic mode, didn't know what to do. Um, but, you know, one thing I can say to defend myself on that day was I did answer the phone, and I made it through the phone call, and we still have a pretty decent relationship to this day, right? We've done a lot of jobs for him. And so I think some of that stuff is they're just doing their job. So they're getting pressure from somebody and they're passing it along to me or to you. And it just so happens that we're probably at the end of the line. But talk to them. All right. Communicate, communicate, communicate. And you communicate with the customer, you communicate with the crew, and you make them a work order, right? Or you deliver them whatever information they need to go out and do the job. You got to put that together well. And one of the things that's challenging for me is understanding or realizing that other people don't know what I know. And I don't mean that like from the perspective of I'm the smartest person on the planet. I mean that from the perspective of I've spent several hours involved in this project, right? Because I've bid it, I've done submittals, I've ordered material, I've done all of these things. So like I'm fairly familiar, pretty familiar with the job at this point. And so it's hard for me to kind of slow down and realize that other people don't know the little details of the stuff that I do know. So when you're going through creating a work order, whatever it is that you got to give to the installers, just make sure that they're equipped to do the job, right? Make sure they have all of the information. So you got to spend enough time on the work orders, going through all of that stuff so that they have what they need. I mean, give them the layouts, give them the material list, give them all the details that you can find. I mean, if you got to go have plan pages printed out, then do it. You know, if you got to go to the site with them and walk it and spend a few hours out there, whatever that is, to make sure that they get started on the right foot and that they understand everything, do it. If you got to schedule a meeting with your superintendent and your crew leader to for all of you to go out and walk the site and make sure everybody's on the same page, there you go. Guess what? Guess what the answer is? Do it. But you got to do what you got to do to get the job done, and that varies based on the complexity of the job. Sometimes it's pretty simple, right? Start at this point and put 250 feet of fence in, and you're done. Sometimes it's far more complex than that. So, getting the right information to the crew is absolutely essential because surprises take time, and time costs money. You know, when you get in the situation, it's like, oh, I didn't know we need that tool. I didn't know we need that equipment. I didn't know that I need an extra post over there. I didn't know. I didn't know. Well, all of that stuff takes time, cost money, all of those things, and it's just the little things. I can't remember who it was. I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about time, and it was something crazy. It was like this company had 20,000 employees, I believe, and they said if every employee wasted 1 minute per hour, then over the course of a year, it equated to something like 365 work years for one person, right? So little what are they what's that phrase that like streams make rivers or little streams make big rivers or something like that, right? But yeah, so all of those little things, if we forgot a little bit of material when we bid the job, and then we forgot a little bit of material when we ordered the job, and then we sent a crew out there and the site wasn't ready. And then we lost some of the stuff that we ordered. It got used on a different job. So we don't have it. Now we got to order it. We got to wait 2 or 3 weeks. And then we go out and maybe we start putting fence in the wrong spot. And then maybe the crew doesn't know that they're supposed to put an extra terminal post in the middle of that fence line. And maybe the crew doesn't know that there's supposed to be a gate there, right? Or whatever that is. Like all of those little things can add up. And depending on the size of the job, like a few little things might, like I said, take away all the profit. I mean, maybe you get on a job that's big enough and it can absorb some of those small things and you still come out on the other side profitable, but those little bitty things add up. And I think it's one of the things that I don't pay enough attention to. And I suspect that maybe somebody else will hear this and maybe you agree that we don't pay enough attention to the little things, right? We focus so much on the big stuff that a lot of times I think we forget about the little stuff. or we don't spend enough time, focused on it. And that little stuff adds up just the same. So that's what I have. We've began the journey and kind of walked through managing a project. I don't know how to go about talking about scenarios, like super specific scenarios of we ran into this thing, what do we do? Right? Because again, there's millions of possibilities. But if anyone out there has specific questions like that, then you can call me and I'd be happy to talk to you about it. Or if you want, maybe you'd be willing to like put your question on the show. You can be anonymous. We don't have to talk about who you are, where you are, any of that stuff. But yeah, we could kind of have your question here on the show and I could give my opinion of the scenario that you're in. So if anybody out there fits that category, let me know and we'll do something to make that happen. But past that, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. And if you have any questions or have any suggestions, let me know. And I'll see you next time.